Your grocery bill is higher than it was last year. You know this. You felt it at the checkout. A basket of food that cost you $40 not long ago now costs 50, maybe more. You didn't buy anything different. You didn't upgrade anything. You just bought the same things you always buy. And yet somehow quietly, without anyone asking your permission, those things cost more. So you do what most people do. You shrug, you pay, you assume prices just go up. That's inflation. That's life. But here's the strange part. Nobody decided your groceries should cost more. No committee met, no vote was taken, no law was passed requiring prices to rise. And yet they did, reliably, predictably, every single year for as long as you've been alive. So why does inflation exist? Not as an accident, not as a glitch, but as a permanent engineered feature of the modern economy. The answer changes everything you thought you knew about money. Go back far enough and money didn't behave this way. For most of human history, the value of money was anchored to something physical, usually gold. Every coin in circulation was backed by a fixed amount of gold sitting in a vault somewhere. Governments couldn't just print more money. They could only issue currency they could cover. This system had a name, the gold standard. Under it, prices were remarkably stable over long periods. Sometimes they even fell. You could save a coin today and expect it to buy roughly the same thing in 20 years. That sounds ideal. So what went wrong? The problem showed up in the 1930s. The Great Depression had devastated the global economy. Unemployment was catastrophic. Businesses were collapsing. Millions of people had no income, and governments found themselves trapped. Under the gold standard, they couldn't inject money into the economy without holding the gold to back it. They couldn't cut interest rates freely. The anchor that had once seemed like discipline was now a chain. Country after country abandoned the gold standard. First Britain in 1931, then the United States partially in 1933, and fully in 1971 when President Nixon permanently severed the dollar from gold. From that moment forward, money was no longer backed by anything physical. It was backed by trust. This is the system you live inside today. Modern money is called fiat currency. It's money because governments say it's money, because you accept it, because everyone agrees to treat it as valuable, and because it's no longer tied to gold, central banks can create more of it. This is where inflation is born. When central banks create new money, more dollars chase the same goods and services. Each unit of money buys slightly less than it did before. That's inflation. Prices rising isn't about things becoming more expensive. It's about money becoming slightly less valuable. So why would anyone design a system that produces this on purpose? Here's where the story becomes genuinely surprising. The answer starts with a problem economists noticed in the early 20th century. Deflation. Deflation is the opposite of inflation. Prices fall, money becomes more valuable over time. That sounds wonderful, but it creates a trap. If you know prices will be lower next year, why buy anything today? You'd wait. And if enough people wait, businesses stop selling, then stop producing, then stop hiring. Wages fall, people spend even less. Businesses cut further. It's a spiral. Each round of caution makes the next round worse. Economists watched this happen during the Great Depression, and the damage was catastrophic. The solution they settled on was radical. Build a small, controlled amount of inflation directly into the system. If prices will be slightly higher next year, you're nudged to spend today. Businesses keep selling. Production continues. Hiring continues. The economy keeps moving. Most central banks today target around 2% per year, enough to encourage spending. Not so much that savings vanish overnight. 2% sounds modest, but here's what it actually does over time. At 2% inflation, something that costs $100 today costs about $120 in a decade. Over 50 years, $270. Your money left sitting still quietly loses more than half its value across a lifetime. This is not a bug, it is the feature. And this is where you need to ask the question most people never ask. If inflation constantly erodes the value of money, who does that actually hurt? And more importantly, who does it help? The answer is not who you might expect. Inflation redistributes wealth in a very specific direction, away from people who hold cash, toward people who hold assets. If you have $10,000 in a savings account, earning all inflation eats into its real value every year. After a decade, it buys roughly what $8,000 bought when you started. Now think about someone who owns a house. As inflation rises, so does the price of their house. Not because the house changed, but because the money pricing it is worth less. The asset holds its real value, often more. The same is true for stocks, land, businesses, anything with productive capacity. People who own these things are quietly protected from inflation. Their wealth adjusts upward with prices. People whose only wealth is cash lose purchasing power every year. And here is the deepest layer. Debt. Inflation is extraordinarily good for borrowers and bad for lenders. If you borrow $100,000 today and inflation runs at 2%, the real value of what you owe shrinks over time. You're still repaying the same number, but that number buys less than it did. The burden quietly deflates. Governments understand this very well. Many carry debts measured in trillions. A steady rate of inflation gradually reduces the real burden without raising taxes or cutting spending. It is not a conspiracy. It is a structural feature of the system. But inflation isn't always quiet. It isn't always controlled. In 1923, Germany experienced one of history's most extreme inflations. The Weimar Republic, crushed by war debts, printed money to survive. Inflation became hyperinflation. By November of that year, a loaf of bread cost 200 billion marks. Workers were paid twice a day to spend wages before they lost value by evening. People burned money for heat because it was cheaper than firewood. Those who had saved in cash were wiped out. Those who had borrowed to buy land found their debts had become worthless. They kept the assets. The middle class, which had saved for generations, was destroyed in months. Modern central banks exist largely to prevent this from happening again. The 2% target is a fence, low enough to keep the economy moving, controlled enough to stop a spiral. But when control slips, the consequences fall hardest on exactly the people they always have, those with the least to protect. So tomorrow morning, you'll probably buy something: coffee, groceries, a bus ticket, fuel. And the price will be slightly higher than last year. You'll notice it briefly, then move on. But now you know what's actually happening. You're experiencing the deliberate consequence of a system built in the ruins of the Great Depression. A system that encodes a small, permanent erosion of purchasing power into everyday life. It keeps businesses running and workers employed. It quietly shrinks government debts. It protects those who own assets and transfers value away from those who hold only cash. It is not random. It is not accidental. Every price increase you've ever noticed, every time your savings didn't stretch as far as they used to, every year that felt slightly more expensive than the last, That was the system working exactly as intended. The next time your grocery bill surprises you at the checkout, and it will, you won't just be paying for food. You'll be participating in the most consequential financial mechanism ever built. And now you'll know it.